From using religion as a tool to get millions of dollars to practicing the most twisted politics ever, this is all about the dark world of megachurches. As much as we'd like to deny it, churches are now operating as business empires to generate as much money as possible, rather than a house of worship. The worst part is that people are buying into it for many reasons. The main one is the sense of community. Because who doesn't want to feel like they belong somewhere? They want to be a part of something big and gravitate toward the passionate preacher whose personality is charismatic, funny, sincere, motivating, and successful. Don't get me wrong, megachurches still do the job of preaching the gospel, and people wanting positive spiritual engagement get what they want, but the way they operate is very questionable. These places don't stand on their knees with arms tied to pray to the Lord above. Instead, they use entertainment as a tool to give a holy experience like never before. The concept of megachurches started in the mid-20th century, and though it's difficult to pinpoint a single first emergence of a house of worship like that, you could say that the Crystal Cathedral in Garden Grove, California was one of the pioneers. This was founded by Robert Schuller in 1955, a televangelist and pastor who earned a larger following from his show, Hour of Power. He faced a lot of controversies further down his career, which involved his theology, financial practices, and leadership decisions. The main thing, and the most important reason that megachurches are an evil place, is the prosperity gospel, a theological belief that teaches financial success. Think of all the Andrew Tate and Sigma male videos about being rich today. Now add a little Christianity to it, but in a way that tells you that donations and contributions strengthen your faith. This was what Schuller was under fire for. Just look at the Crystal Cathedral. I see why they picked such a fancy name for a place like this. Everyone who practices the prosperity gospel has basically been accused of manipulating the audience they present to. And in case you haven't realized by now, this isn't some standard church with an altar on the stage. Think bigger, like Beyonce's Renaissance tour, but bigger. But let's get into the details of what the prosperity gospel is in the first place. Basically, it's a belief that God will reward you with material success. So if you pray hard enough, He'll make you rich. This is where the pastors come into play. Their lavish lifestyles are solely due to financial exploitation, all under the guise of religion and good faith. The way the prosperity gospel works is that pastors will encourage the crowd of believers to donate as much money as they can to the church or ministry, promising them that these donations will result in financial blessings from God. The speakers have a certain tone to them. Apart from the charisma, they can get pretty manipulative, mainly because a lot of people take religion seriously. Now, how bad are some of these pastors? Well, would you believe someone with a job like that would be living in multi-million-dollar mansions, flying private jets, and owning some of the most luxurious cars? Take Joel Osteen, for example. With his $100 million fortune, yes, you heard that right, he purchased a basketball stadium owned by the Houston Rockets. He also owns a Ferrari 458 Italia worth $325,000. And let me tell you, social media was not happy. He also has a $68 million Airbus A319 for all the flying he needs to do to attend his sermons. Why would a pastor of all people need these things? What happened to flying commercial? Unfortunately, this is only the tip of the iceberg of everything that goes on in a megachurch. There are so many layers to financial exploitation that you have no idea. But one of my favorites was Project G650, a campaign that aimed to raise $65 million from Pastor Creflo Dollar's followers. What was this money for? Oh, just a private jet, of course. His excuse? Creflo needed a convenient means of travel to preach to different countries around the world as part of his ministry. He had 2 bad experiences on planes that could have risked his and his daughter's lives. Creflo had a whole ad campaign being broadcast on TV in 2015, and luckily, most of the people watching weren't so gullible. This little stunt raised a lot of questions and sparked a debate about the financial practices of some televangelists, their use of donations, and the scrutiny they face when asking for large sums of money for personal assets. Like Osteen and Creflo, other pastors such as Benny Hinn and Kenneth Copeland have all been criticized for their glamorous lifestyles. Copeland has multiple mansions, private jets, and assets worth millions. But hoarding money isn't the only thing these people do, because megachurches also encourage selfishness. Members of these congregations are taught to focus on themselves and their own problems instead of what actual religious teachings say about helping others as servants of God. Besides, isn't religion all about having eternal happiness in an afterlife from being good on this earth? This is a temporary place for both Christians and Muslims. So why would these televangelists preach the prosperity gospel? Did you know that most of the people in the congregation at these places are single? On top of that, around 45% of megachurch members don't volunteer for community service. Churches are also supposed to be small places of gathering where everyone knows each other, harboring a sense of community. Megachurches, on the other hand, are like concerts. No, seriously. Apart from doing sermons at huge stadiums with thousands of people attending, they're also televised, encouraging spectator worship. And as for the quote-unquote sense of community, I can bet you all the money Project G650 asked for that no two families know each other in a place like a former Houston Rockets basketball stadium. This brings me to another point about megachurches and their pastors. It's a corporation and entertainment business, not a house of worship. The Gate Church in Oklahoma hosted a children's event with characters from Frozen back in 2019 to celebrate Christmas. This might seem like a nice little gesture for the kids, but imagine the same thing happening at a traditional church with a few seats and simple architecture. Yeah, it doesn't look right, does it? So when I said that pastors have luxurious lifestyles, one of the reasons is that they're practically celebrities at this point. They'd be called to talk shows, podcasts, and prestigious events. Even Kanye West spoke at Osteen's Megachurch, and we all know how big of a celebrity he is. From clips of his speech, people have their phones up and are cheering after every word he says. In fact, his conversation with Joel was 20 minutes long. Screens, expensive equipment, and camera crews. The production is insane. To think that with all of this in your hands, you do some good and raise awareness of everything going on in the world. Well, there have been a ton of reports of the injustice and extremist views preached at megachurches. Look, I know there's a huge gray area between religion and humanity, according to recent views and ideologies, of course. But conservative politics affect Black communities as well. Evangelic churches supported Donald Trump back in the 2016 elections. And apart from that, 27% of Black Christians felt pressure to give up their racial identities just to fit in. They're also pretty sexist, where gender roles are preached, telling wives that they're expected to submit to their husbands and that the patriarch of the family should be respected. But this isn't new information to practicing Christian women. What really takes the cake is the real origin of megachurches. One of the important people who shaped the modern corporation was Peter Drucker, an Austrian turned American. He helped create the modern seeker-sensitive model that most of today's megachurches follow. Guess what though? His philosophy was mostly fascist. When Drucker was developing management theories for the megachurch model in the 1980s, he collaborated with early megachurch pioneers like Rick Warren. Most of his aspects had fascist ideologies and were leader-focused because pastors are given complete authority. If you look at some of the clips of these megachurches, you'll think the same. In the end, the leaders must be followed. Followers must serve idea is a very fascist concept. Sorry to get political though. What I'm trying to say is that something like the prosperity gospel being preached to give believers a sense of faith is very dark and twisted. Financially struggling families would think their fates are destined because of who they are and that they're not worshiping hard enough. It makes people believe that if you're rich, God loves you. A pretty grim way to end the video, but from practicing the most twisted politics ever to using religion as a tool to get millions of dollars, that was all about the dark world of megachurches.